Hello everyone and welcome to another tutorial, and this time I'll be talking about how to create leaves using Arnold shader using my 2018 and Arnold 5. Now there are more advanced tutorials on how to do this. You should see Armin's tutorial. I'm just going to go over some of the basics, talk about how to set up a double-sided shader so we can get it back and front, and go through some of the little quirks of Arnold to get this to work. So before we get started, I would like to demonstrate the different types of leaves we have and how we deal with them. So first we got the actual model leaf and the texture on it, and the first problem that we'll probably get is like little bleeds like this, and I'll talk about how we can fix it later. Same on here on the stem. We can or texture it properly, like using Mario or something like that. But if we're just using an image projection, then this is some of the things I'm going to do here are going to solve a lot of that. Next one is a card. Basically you want just a simple card with minimum of divisions. Usually you get these from SpeedTree or Paint Effects. Just make sure that your cards have a few divisions, so if you use displacement or something like that, it can work very nicely. Actually on trees, because they're so small and far away, 8 divisions should be quite enough. Alright, and one of the most common is basically shaping your geo to fit the leaf but still have it a card. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just move some of these vertices without changing my UVs. To do this, we can actually do it pretty easily in Maya. You're going to go to our Move tool, W on the keyboard or the icon here. I'm going to just double click. It's going to open the options, and you'll see a checkbox over here that's called Preserve UVs. So the minute I check that, what I do is now move the verts here and preserve the UVs, and then I can actually kind of build this pretty close. And then let's say if I go to the multi-cut here, and there. Alright, so again, as long as that's on, we can do a lot of stuff. So I'm just gonna try to get this as close as I can. Now we don't need it perfect because we're going to use masks to pull out the rest, so it just needs to be an approximation of the shape. Keep it on its plane. There we go. Quite a lot of work. Yep, I'd say that's pretty cool. Don't need anything more than that. With that, I'm going to stop the video. Well, stop this segment, and in the next segment we'll jump into Arnold and start building up our shader. Alright, so before we jump into this, I would like to say that if you guys are interested, guys and girls that are interested in how to create the textures, I'll be happy to make a video about that. Just leave a comment or ask any question and see if I can answer. But until then, let's just see how we use Arnold AI shader to kind of create our basic leaf shader over here. So first thing I need to do is kind of optimize my scene. So I could use the render settings. I just like creating my own workspace. I tend to get rid of my timeline and time range and help line, get rid of those, just leave my command line at the bottom. And then I'm going to go to my Arnold shelf. There it is. And open the Arnold renderer. And I'm going to just dock it on the side here. And then I'm going to open my shader. Let's see if I can dock. Alright, so that docked it above the viewport. I'm actually not sure that this is what I want to do. That together with the viewport. Right, there we go. Alright, so before we get started, I'm just going to create a new tab, and that's going to be our workspace. I don't use this little swatch. I mean, we can use it for other things. Armand uses it to display some textures and stuff. I'm just going to close it, and I'm going to close the attribute editor because I like the one on this side. Nice and easy, and I can see my work here on the side. All right, let's begin. Okay, so now that we set up, we can begin. So first thing that I want to do is basically just create a new workspace. To do that, I'm just going to click on this plus button, and I'm going to get a new workspace. Okay, so because this is an AI shader tutorial, first thing I need to do is create one of those. So we're going to go to an AI standard surface, and this is going to be my start shader. So because it's a new node, I'm going to give it a name. So let's name it AI underscore. This is going to be leaf underscore top underscore matte. Okay, and this is going to be my base layer for just the top textures. Now, before we jump in and connect all the textures to this, what we're going to do is add a displacement map. Now, why am I doing the displacement map at this stage? It's because it's kind of easier to deal with it at an early stage before you've committed to all kind of other things, and because that the surface shader, or the standard surface, is kind of the connector between the geometry and the actual shader. This is basically telling Maya, oh, grab this grab this shader and connect it to the geometry so it can render. So we'll take the normal data and the directional data of the surfaces and kind of apply all of the data that the shader is bringing and put it together. Alright, so how do we get to it? We can click on the node here, and then we can see the surface shader over here. We can go into it, and you can see over here it says displacement map, and this is where we're going to plug in our displacement. So we can just click on the checker icon, choose file, and that will do all the connections for us, so we don't need to work very hard. But you should always check out the actual connections, like what's going in and out, so you can do it yourself if you just want to call up the displacement displacement shell, and then you'll get the same thing here, and then you could check out, see it's also going out the displacement. You can delete that on there and then just do the same connections. So just grab the displacement and do that, and then you've done the same thing. Alright, so now that I've shown you how to do this simple task, there we go. By the way, I press tab to get the call up, so you can call up any node by typing its name. Alright, now let's just bring in our displacement. So I just need to go to my displacement, Where's my displacement? Displacement top. That's going to be my displacement top. And nothing's happened. So the reason nothing's happened is that we didn't assign the material. So I'm just going to drag and drop it. It's going to turn into this gray. And all I need to do now is render. Now I did go ahead and create a light, dome light. To do that, I'll just delete the one that's here. Just go to the icon, dome light, bam, we have a dome light. All fun and great. So now if I press here, it's gonna render out and show the displacement. Now I also, off camera, what I've done is changed a few things. So I better show you how I did that. So as this is rendering, I'm gonna just pause this for a minute and I'll minimize it. So usually what happens when you start off, under the shape node of the leaf, so if this is my leaf, it's going to be leaf geo, right? I should give it a prefix or suffix, so this is going to geo, geo. Under the shape node over here, you'll go down to the Arnold tab, and under subdivisions, usually what you get is by default something that looks like this. And let me just turn off the bump. I'm actually just turning off some stuff so you guys can see the behavior. So I've turned under the Arnold, under the displacement, turned off the bump. So now you can see like there's nothing here. There's no displacement, or very little. We can actually see that by going to wireframe. Now to get this little tab, you need to go to Window and just turn on everything here under the tab icons. Just turn everything on here but the last two. You could turn everything on if you want. So you can see basically that I got just the basic subdivision, and what I want to do is just call up more subdivisions to get that detail in, because if we have so little subdivisions, there's nothing really that Maya can pull. So if we go to the surface and go back to the subdivision here, by default it says none. We'll change it to Kalman-Clark, and then we can just knock that up, and as we go up in the subdivision, you can see all of that detail come up. So let's say I'm in 6 or 7, you got all of this very fine detail now. Alright, so the higher you go, the longer the renders are going to be, but that's kind of, you gotta kind of play with it. Alright, so with that, I'm just going to go back here to shaded. We got all this detail. Now I could add the fine detail. Before I do that, I kind of want to, it's a little too deep, so I'm just going to knock down the distance. To do that, we can do first the scale. We can change the scale, so that's going to make sure it doesn't go further than the scene scale. And then over here, I'm just going to go 0.1 and see the difference. I'm getting like very subtle detail, maybe too subtle. Let's make that 0.5. I think that's a little better. So we get that, all those nice ridges, but it's not pulling out too far, and we're getting a much nicer look. Now we could just put on auto bump and we get that extra detail, and then later on we'll put bump and get even more detail, like the fine detail. So right now if we move in closer, you can actually see some of the detail, not all of it. And then I'll put on the bump and we'll get all of that lovely, lovely detail. Alright, so I'm just gonna zoom out a bit and close this, stop the render, and with that I'm gonna stop the video, and when we come back we're gonna look at connecting up the rest of the stuff. Alright, so where we left off, basically we set up our displacement. So let's have a look at how we set up the rest of the textures. So let's start off with some of the easier stuff. In our AI shader, we basically got our basic base color, our specular, our transparency, which is called transmission, and then subsurface, which is the light that gets absorbed. Then we got an extra coat. That's if you have like some sort of lack, or maybe water or something, you can use that. And then we have emission. That's if it's kind of lighting itself. Thin film, so if it's a bubble, you can use that. And then geometry, which is sort of like the advanced anything that's got to do with the geometry itself. So we'll get to use this in a minute. So the first thing we want to do is set up the base color. I'm going to open up my render view and just minimize it. I'm just going to pull it off screen, so I'll pull it back every time we take a look at something. Alright, so let's look at what if I already have a texture that I've used, like on the Lambert 3 that we started off. I can go and grab the textures that I need from here. So I could just middle mouse drag it into the scene, and then just drag out the color into base color. So now if I bring that in here and press play, you can see that I'm getting the base color. So that's all cool, but the one problem that I'm noticing is that, alright, I got the base color and I got the displacement, but I can see the extra geometry here, and I actually want to cut this out. So how do I do that? Because if I suppose that if I go to my transparency and I bring that up to full, and then let's say pipe into the color over here, I'll pipe in, let's say that a mask that I've set up. So let's go, I got an alpha over here and set it up. Firstly, I could see right here in the screen that I got a problem. My alpha is the wrong way around. And secondly, as I move around, you could see actually the specular and some other properties, such as the come on, I'm drawing a blank. The IOR is not being cancelled out. So what do I mean? So you get the index of refraction. That's the word I was looking for. So if I press play here, you'll see that I'm getting an index of refraction here, and this is back to front. So that's kind of a problem. So let's say I want to just switch this over. So the easiest thing I can do is just press tab and go rev, and then we find reverse, press enter, connect that to that, connect that to the color, and as I bring this back and pull back, you can see now I got the opposite side, but I lost the color. I've lost I still have some serious issues here. So how do I fix this? How do I make it work? Well, it's fairly simple. Let me just stop that render. I'm gonna just remove this reverse because I don't really need it. And under transparency, I'm just gonna turn it off. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go all the way down to geometry, and where it says here opacity, I'm just gonna middle mouse drag and drop it onto the opacity. So when I render out, I should see something, but nothing's happening. So why is this happening? Well, it's fairly simple. The geo itself needs to know that that I've cut that out. So again, I'll go to the shape node, and like before, when I was playing around with the subdivisions, I've gone to the Arnold, and one of the first options I have here is this little checkbox. If I uncheck it, what will happen will create a cutout, and voila, it's working. Alright, so now I got my texture, I got my cutout. Now all I need to do is add a few more things. So let's do that. So next thing I need to set up, I'm just going to move this down, and I'm actually going to use the same 3D texture node. So to do that, you hold down Control Shift middle mouse click and drag, and that should, sorry, just control, not control shift, and middle mouse drag from one yellow button to the other, and it's going to use the same node. That's just, you know, to make things calculate faster, and we can actually use it on this one as well. There we go. I'm just going to have everything use the same 2D placement. Alright, now next file. So let's talk about specular. So specular would be the next step. So I'm going to go up to the specular color, and we're just going to pump in the specular, and call it up. So I should have a spec color, spec top. Alright, so you can now see I got like the specular here, and of course we can manipulate this, but I'm just going to leave it at default because that's the whole other tutorial and we don't have that much time. Alright, so usually you want to kind of spread it out, so a higher number will spread it out more. So the higher number, let's say 5, it spreads it out, makes it more like so, and then we can knock it down or rough it up a bit, and you get a something more like this. Let's get a little closer. Maybe it's a little too, see, we starting to get all that nice detail. Maybe it's not waxy enough for my taste, so I'm gonna knock that down to about 2, and I think I'm happy with this. That feels more like a leaf. I'll probably change it some more later. Alright, so that's cool. I'm going to stop that. Alrighty, so where we left off, I set up a simple shader. It had a specular, it has a color, and it has a matte. So now I set up the bottom color, and I want to show you how we're going to work on that one and do a few little changes to it. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to expose its attributes just so we can all see what's going on. And in this case, what I want to do is just assign it to the geometry. Now I don't need to drag and drop it on to its geometry. All I need to do is just take out the out color and go into the surface shader here, and I'm basically preserving this AI shader surface. Alright, so if I bring this back in, you can see it's a bit weird, and the reason is I just duplicated that shader. So to fix it, all I need to do is just change a few little items here. The specular also should go up. Alright, back to default. I did pipe in the opacity already. It's already coming out. It's just being piped into there. So once I've changed those attributes, you can now see that we have a good behavior. So in this case, I'm actually going to make underneath of the leaf is going to be fairly non-specular. So we're going to make it very rough. So it's going to be very flat out, and then I'm going to rough it out pretty well. So it's going to be pretty rough, but there's still some specular, and I'm going to knock it down somewhat. So we got this behavior. So let's say I'm happy with this, but for now what we want to do is create a situation where on one side is this leaf, and then the other side is the top of the leaf, because they're going to behave differently. Alright, so to do that is fairly simple, and then I'll just take that from here to there. Boom. Alright, is create a sort of connector between this guy and these two. And to do that, we can use an AI 2 shader, and you'll find this under shader, under the Arnold renderer, and just click that, and it will create a new sort of surface connector. So we're going to just blow that away, and I'm just going to switch the out color here, and this is going to be the back face. So we want the out color to go into the back. over there, and same here, we want the out color to go into the front. So now if I bring this back and press render, you'll see that this side is going to be the top of the leaf, and then when I swing to the other side, this side is going to be the back of the leaf. So we got both sides of the leaf. Alright, cool. In the next part of the video, we are going to look at subsurface and how to control it. In the last segment, we looked at the double-side shader and we got to know how to use it. In this segment, we're going to look at subsurface scatter and see how to set that up. Now, this is not going to be a comprehensive tutorial, but just basic workflow and how to deal with it. So as you can see, I got my my two shaders, I got my two textures, I got my specular set up, I got everything set up and ready to go. All I need is a light source that's going to kind of penetrate the leaf and go through it, and something to stop the light from between the light and the leaf so you can see like a shadow that goes through. So let's start off with the light source. That's the easiest bit. You can just create a Arnold light, or in our case we are going to create a light dome. So I have the light dome. I have this texture ready to go, so I'm just going to drag and drop it. Of course, you just need to press the little checker box. You'll get a file. You can go and look for it anywhere in your computer. Now I'm going to press the rotate tool and rotate around so this is more or less aligned with the camera. And I'm just going to align my leaf to be in line with the sun. So that's kind of what I want to do. I'm also going to hold down the space bar, and with my mouse hovering over Maya, I'm just going to create a new camera. This is going to be my render cam. So what I'm going to do is just select that camera and rename it cam 1. Oops. Cam 1. Alright. So let's go back to our perspective. Again, just hold down space, drag upwards, and you'll have your perspective. Alright, so now we're here, and what I want to do is create a sphere. So I'm going to go to Create, Polygon, Sphere, and I'm just going to scale it up and just slightly move it behind it and up and to the side, just like so. So now if I open my render view, and it will open up on the other screen, but now all I need to do is just choose my cam 1, and this is what I'm going to get, and let's just realign the camera a bit, like something like that. Alright, so what I want to do is basically have the light from the sun hit the leaf, be absorbed by the leaf, and then come out again, so we get the subsurface scatter. So let's do that. It's pretty simple. I'm going to just pause this here, otherwise things may crash. I'm going to pull this to the side because we got to do a few things here. Alright, so let's start off with the front, because this is the one that we're going to start off. So for that we just need the color file and our shader for the front. And then under subsurface, all we need to do is middle mouse drag and drop that into the surface color. But as you can see, it's grayed out, and the reason it's grayed out, it's because the weight is at 0. So if I now drag that all the way to 1 and render, what we're going to get is like a kind of blurred out color. Now the reason it's blurred out is that by putting it at 1%, I'm basically stopping the actual color, the base color. It's just all the light is being absorbed and we're kind of losing the base color. So we're going to fix that in a sec. But first, whoop, we are just going to grab the color and drop it into the surface, because now it's no longer grayed out. So if I bring back my render, you can see now that the color is returned and we're getting a pretty nice result, but it's still not exactly what we want. So let's have a look. So by default, the scale is pretty high, and the scale is going to basically decide how much light is going to come through. So I'm going to just grab that ball and just move it aside a bit, just a tad, like so. Alright, sometimes what you need to do is just stop the render and just refresh. Do that again. Okay. So now that we have this, we need to control the amount of color that's going to go through. And right now it's exactly the same color. I want to make the color that's being absorbed to be a little more vibrant. Alright, so what I'm going to do is select my color here, and I'm going to very simply call up a remap node. So to do that, I'm going to press tab and just write remap HSV and create that node. And then take the L color, plug it in there, take the L color from the texture into the color socket, and then we'll do the same into the subsurface color over here, right down there. Alright, so at first you don't see much of a difference. I'm actually going to isolate by pressing this button here, and you're going to see like the color that's over here. And what we want to do is pretty simple, is start messing around with the saturation. So let's make this a lot more greener, and let's push up, let's make it a little more yellow, and then a lot brighter. So now when I unisolate, you'll see that there's a slight difference. Alright, we're getting a lot more green in. So if I go back to my shader, right, to my shader, there we go, and we play around with the intensity, you could see that there's less and less light. So we started off with that, and now we have this. Now of course we want the sphere to kind of stop the light coming through, so let's play around with that. So I'm just going to stop the render and move the sphere pretty close to our leaf over here, so it's almost touching it, and then I'm going to re-render, and you're going to see that some of the light is going to be stopped. It's not really showing, I'm not sure exactly why. I think it's not close enough. There we go. Alright, so it's not really showing through, and I think I know why. It's because my light isn't strong enough. So I'm going to just grab my light, and under exposure I'm just going to put 2, and suddenly we're getting a lot more light filling the scene. And yeah, I don't know why it's not showing through, but it should show through. We can basically now maybe just change the angle of the camera. Let's see, get closer. Alright. So for now this is okay. What I'm going to do is just rotate the leaf as much as I can. Let's make it 180 degrees. And I'm going to pause the video, and when I come back I'm going to have the other side done. Alright, so we are back, and here you can actually, because it's lighter, you can actually see some of that ball through the leaf. If I play around with the scale, I could make it darker or lighter, or have it more absorb some of that shadow. So let's say I make it 0.5, it will behave differently. So I'm getting a little more shadow into it. Alright, so all in all, that's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this was helpful. And if you guys are interested in more things, please don't be shy to ask. I'm having an upcoming video in the future that's going to talk about blend shapes and the new system, and I hope you guys will like it. So see you then.